So this is another lecture on learning. And one of the things I said last time is that online learning has some advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is I can sit here and teach you while holding my cat, or not. Or, I could, for example, have a glass of wine while I'm teaching you. I hardly ever get to do that in teaching a face-to-face class. And you don't know, this could maybe just be a virtual glass of wine. This could all be a fake backdrop. Who knows? Point is, there are advantages and disadvantages to online learning. Probably one of the disadvantages is you get to see my ugly legs if I'm wearing shorts. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm actually here to talk about what learning is. So if you recall from the last lecture, I left off, I promised to give you a sort of a definition of learning. In fact, I asked you all to come up with your own definition. What is learning? Because after all, we're here in college, we are full-time learners, that's our job. It might be a good idea to have a pretty clear idea of what learning is. Now this time I didn't ask you to send me your definition, because all of this stuff, this little side series of discussions is not part of the curriculum for the class, really. It's just stuff that I'm doing because I think it's important that I do what I can to help you guys have a good college experience, particularly since we're all going through this awful experience with this pandemic. And I really feel for you guys. In fact, I have a son your age, if you're a college freshman. My son graduated high school just this past June, and he's starting college. He didn't get to graduate in the normal way that his older brother did. He didn't get to go live on campus, all that kind of stuff. So you guys are in a particularly difficult position, and I'm sorry about that. We got to make the best of it, and so we got to turn it to our advantage if we can, and maybe this is one of the ways we can do that. We can be a little bit more informal. At least I can. I don't know about you. So here's my idea of what learning is. Right? We can all come up with different definitions, but it's kind of a tricky thing. Again, it's a basic thing that we all know what it is, right? We know what learning is. Why do we need to come up with a definition? Well, just like with coming up with that definition of music, it might change the way you think about that thing. It might open new avenues of exploration or whatever. And being a teacher, I think any good teacher should think seriously about what learning is. Continuously think seriously about what learning is. And try and refine the ways that we try and bring about effective learning. So here's the definition that I've come up with. And again, my own idea of a good definition is it's simple. It includes everything that is necessary, but nothing that is unnecessary or nothing that is disqualifying. My idea is this. Learning is the process of understanding and remembering something which you didn't know before. Now, hopefully that something that you didn't know before is something which is true and not false, and is something that is useful, although that's trickier because we never know what is going to be useful in advance. At least we might not know. It could be that you learned something that you thought was useless, but it comes in handy somewhere down the road in a way that you could not have anticipated. All right. By the way, there's a whole field of philosophy, or a subfield within philosophy called epistemology. And epistemology has to do with how we know things. It is the philosophy of knowing things. How do we know whether or not we know something? This is a very deep and complex area within philosophy that philosophers have been talking about for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. Right? So, learning is that process of understanding and then remembering something that we didn't know before. And the problem that I see with the way that students try to learn. First of all, I'm going to make a distinction between the word learning and the word studying. Now, studying is a perfectly good word, but unfortunately it's kind of been ruined in a way, because what people often do when they studying is sort of like an artificial activity that is often undertaken, let's say, a day or two before a test. And there are certain actions that you perform when you study. Maybe you make flashcards, or maybe you make an outline, which I think is actually better than making flashcards. Or maybe you use a highlighter, which is the worst thing of all, in my opinion. A highlighter gives you the feeling of learning and studying without any actual learning taking place. So you can see I have some pretty strong opinions about these things. They are opinions that I have developed over the course of not just 25 years being a college professor, but 10 years of being a college student before that. You might be wondering, my God, it took you 10 years to get through college? Yes, because I did undergraduate degrees and then graduate degrees. And then before that, of course, I was a student K through 12. So my whole life really has been about the learning process, either as a student on the receiving end or as a teacher. So I've developed a lot of pretty strong opinions, and in the end, I guess they're just opinions, but they're pretty strong opinions, and they're opinions backed up by a lifetime of experience, especially as a teacher. Oh, there goes the cat. As a teacher, dealing with college students, people about your age, and even when I was a student, I saw some of the same kind of problems with the way that students approach learning / studying. Right? So first of all, I would rather you think about learning in terms of learning rather than studying. Think of yourself as a full-time learner. It's your full-time job, and you're always learning. Right? Okay, let's look at that definition. Understanding and remembering are the two key components. The problem with the way that most people study or try to learn is that they focus so much on the remembering and not enough on the understanding. And in fact, it should be exactly the opposite. Isn't that right, Bianca? If you focus much more on the understanding, then you don't need to focus so much on the remembering. If you truly understand something, you don't need to spend a lot of effort remembering it, right? Because once you understand it, it's sort of plugged in and it stays. Right? Now, how do we come to understand things that we didn't know before? We usually do it by trying to infuse those things with meaning, with significance. Right? Think about this. What if I asked you to memorize a long string of numbers? Maybe, let's say, a 20-digit number, right? What if I told you, okay, I'm going to give you an assignment. You are going to be locked in a room with no pencil or paper or anything. I'm going to give you a 20-digit number, and you have to remember that number. And I'm going to come back to the room in an hour, and you have to report that number back to me. And let's say, the stakes are really high. Let's say there's money involved. $1 million. You can remember this 20-digit number. You get $1 million. What would you do to try and remember that number? Probably some of you would say, well, I would just repeat it over and over again. Yeah, I guess you could try that, just chanting the number over and over and over again for an hour. But I don't think that would be the most efficient method. I think you would be liable to get tripped up and confused. I don't think that's a very effective method. I think a more effective method would be to assign some kind of significance to these random numbers. For example, you might find mathematical patterns in them. You might associate certain numbers with other numbers that you already know about that have some significance in your mind. Maybe part of that number sequence is going to be similar to a phone number of somebody you know. Or maybe, let's say that 4 of those numbers are 1776, 1776. You say, oh, okay, that's when, the Declaration of Independence, the birth of our country, 1776, something like that, okay? You would take these previously meaningless numbers and you would kind of infuse them with significance, and that would make them memorable. Because the significance of those numbers, the fact that you recognize something in them that connects to something you already know in your head, that's what makes them stick. It's sort of like the way that Lego pieces can be plugged into other Lego pieces, right? If you have a way of associating that which is strange and unfamiliar with something that is familiar, something that you already know, so that you build upon that foundation of things that you already know, right? That's really all that learning is. We take things that you don't know and we relate them to things that you do know, and that makes them stick so that you truly understand those things. And once you understand those things, you don't have to spend a lot of time drilling and remembering them because you kind of have ownership of them, right? That's the approach that you should try and take to learning, right? You should focus on understanding. Overwhelmingly, 90% understanding, right? And the remembering won't be such a problem. And I speak about this in terms of experience, not just, again, as someone who gives tests, let's say, but as a student. For example, in order to become a big shot college professor, you have to not only get a bachelor's degree in some field, you have to go on and get a master's degree and probably also a doctoral degree. So my doctoral degree is in music, obviously. And in order to get that doctoral degree, it's not just a matter of taking a bunch of classes and getting good grades. You have qualifying exams at the end of that period of study. And no matter how well you did in your classes and in the exams in those classes, you could get A's on all your classes. But if you fail your qualifying exams, you are done. You are out. And all that time and all that money you spent kind of wasted, at least in terms of getting a degree. You might have learned, but you're not going to get your degree unless you pass those qualifying exams. And those qualifying exams are very high pressure. And I know people who did not pass them. Smart people, right? People who have gotten all the way to the end of 10 years of college, but they couldn't pass the qualifying exams, and they didn't get their doctoral degrees. And it's kind of a heartbreaking thing, but that's the way it is. Obviously, I passed my qualifying exams because I'm here teaching this class. I got my doctoral degree, and it's because, in part, it's not because I'm smarter than anyone else, I don't think. It's because I had effective ways of studying, and I focused on meaning and significance. I did not try to memorize things that I don't understand. Trying to memorize things that you don't understand doesn't work. Again, it's like trying to memorize a string of numbers or a string of letters that has no significance to you. You have to make that stuff significant. You have to make it meaningful by understanding it, and that's done by relating it to something you already know. What does that mean in terms of your practical, day-to-day studying? For one thing, if you are reading the book, okay, you should not read for the sake of reading. You should not take notes for the sake of taking notes as just sort of an activity. Well, I'm running my eyes over these words. I'm reading. The reading is just a means to an end. The end that we are after is understanding. Taking notes, for example. It's great if you're taking notes, but if you're taking notes just to take notes, just to fill a notebook, right? Or if you figure, well, if he says it, I got to write it down. Yeah, that's part of the process, but it's just a tool, right? The purpose of reading and the purpose of taking notes, it's all a tool to help you understand. So as you are reading, you should be continuously asking yourself, do I really understand this stuff that I'm reading? You have to be honest with yourself and say, do I really understand it? Do I understand the meaning of every word? Right? And if you don't understand the meaning of certain words, of course, it's easier than ever to look those words up. If it's online, you just highlight that word and search for it, and you'll get a definition. But you also have professors for that. If you read a paragraph in the book and you're like, I've read this a couple times, I still don't understand it. Please don't hesitate. Immediately send me an email and ask me the question about the thing you don't understand. And that's where I come in. That's why we need professors, because sometimes people don't understand something that's in a book. And I guess I'm kind of bragging here, but I think I have a special talent for explaining things in such a way as to help people understand. Try me, okay? Ask me about things that you're having trouble with, and challenge me to help you understand it better. And if I give you an explanation and you still don't understand it, ask me again. Keep asking me until you feel like, yes, I understand, I get it. And once you do understand that thing, you'll be amazed. You don't really need to spend that much time remembering it. Now, you might need to review it. You might need to go over and consolidate your understanding. And this is where I would say another aspect of learning, of effective learning, is it has to be done continuously. You should think about the relationship of, let's say, learning new information to your brain as a full-time learner, as like eating food is nourishment to your body. Right? Nobody that I know of starves themselves for 3 weeks and then tries to eat 3 weeks worth of food. Right? It doesn't work. First of all, your body would tell you very quickly, hey, we need some food down here. Your stomach would start rumbling. You start to feel weak and faint, right? You wouldn't make it 3 weeks without food. I don't think most of us would, right? And it's the same way with learning, except unfortunately, unlike with eating, your body does not have a mechanism to tell you, hey, hey, we're not learning anything here. We're not getting enough information into the brain, right? Now, there is one way that your body might tell you that you're not learning. If you ever get that feeling of butterflies during a test anxiety, right, where you go blank or whatever. Now, a lot of times when that kind of thing happens, and this might have happened to you, you might be told by some teacher or someone like me, well, your problem is you get test anxiety. You're just a bad test taker. It's not that you're stupid or you're lazy or your preparation is no good. It's just that you're a bad test taker. The problem is the taking of the test. And I'm here to tell you that's almost always wrong. The problem is not with the taking of the test. The problem is the preparation for taking the test. And unfortunately, you don't know that you're not prepared until you actually go to take the test. And that's when you find out. Unfortunately, by that time, you're finding out too late, right? How can you find out in advance whether or not you're prepared for a test? Real easy way, go and see your professor. Go and see him during his office hours, his or her office hours. It's kind of amazing to me how few of my students, anyway, ever come to see me during office hours. And I know this semester's a little different. We might not have actual in-person office hours, although I'm open to that, actually. I am going to be going on campus at least once a week, and if you want to meet in person, I can do that. But we can always, the equivalent of office hours would be, just email questions or something like that. Or let's say we could use Zoom for that purpose. I don't think Zoom is very useful for a 50-person class, but it could be useful for like having virtual office hours. All of your professors are obliged, as part of their job, to have at least 5 hours of office time open to students every week. And this is something I take seriously, and any of your other professors should too. And by the way, they might have office hours scheduled during a certain time, but if you can't make those times, you should ask your professor, say, well, I've got classes during that time. Is there some other time we could meet? And they should say yes. They should accommodate you This is an important part of our jobs. Nonetheless, very, very few students, at least in my experience, take us up on the office hours. In a typical semester, when I have, let's say, 200 students in my 4 or 5 different sections of Intro to Music, guess how many times in a typical semester I will have a student come to my office hours? It ranges between 0 and 1, okay? Very, very rarely do I have students come to my office hours, and yet I know that I have students who are struggling in the class, who do poorly on the tests, and yet for some reason they don't want to take the initiative, take that little extra effort to come see me, when if they did so, they could raise their grade dramatically. Not because I'm feeding them the answers either. What normally happens when someone comes to me for office hours is I don't give them answers. I ask them questions, and I sort of probe them and see how prepared they are for the test. And what I'm specifically looking for is, and you should do this with yourself, when you're coming up to a test, you should be able to explain the material. You should be able to define terms or describe concepts or whatever it is without looking at your notes, out of your head. Because the closer you get to the test, of course, your professor is not going to be testing your notebook. They're testing your brain, okay? A lot of times, on those rare occasions when I do have students come to my office hours, very often they will ask me, could you look at my notes and see if what I've got in there is correct? I'll say, okay, I look at the notes, and usually the notes look fine. So, good notes. In fact, a student who is going to come to me for office hours usually has good notes, because the fact that they are coming to me for office hours means that they are trying. They are taking the course seriously, right? They're not lazy, they're not stupid. It's just that they haven't learned effective methods of studying, and they haven't learned how important it is to try and gradually get the material out of the notebook and into their heads, all right? Because the notebook is just a tool. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's just a tool. So if I have a student come to me for office hours and I start asking them questions, if they start reading the answers out of their notebook, I'll say, no. Tell me the answer in your own words, out of your head. See if you can recall it. All right? I'm not testing your ability to read out of a notebook. I assume you can read. If you came to college, you can probably read just fine. What I want to know is, do you understand? All right? Can you put it in your own words? Can you teach it to someone else? This is a great way of testing whether you are prepared for a test. And again, the reason I'm going over all this stuff, it's not just for my class, for any class, for anything in life. You know, there are going to be times outside of school, after you've graduated, when you might need to make presentations, let's say for your boss or for a meeting of your colleagues or whatever it is, where you might need to demonstrate your understanding of something and explain it to people and answer questions. And if you're looking down at your notes the whole time, people are going to say, this guy doesn't really know what he's talking about. He's just reading off of notes. You know, he doesn't really have a good grasp of it. So here's what you do. Let's say a few days before a test, practice teaching the material to someone out of your own head, the way that I teach it, right? When you see me teaching, by the way, you don't see me reading notes, right? I might look down at the book just to use it as sort of a point of departure, right? As a reference point, in part, so that you can see where in the book I am, where these concepts are. But I'm not reading out of the book because I don't remember this stuff, right? Or that I can't come up with it on my own. You should try teaching the material to, I don't know, your roommate, your friend, your mom, or yourself. You could just set up your camera like I'm doing now and just start explaining the material, right, into the camera. Oh, look at this. Here's another kitty cat. Come here. Right? If you can teach something, if you can explain something to someone else, it probably means you know that thing pretty well yourself. And if you cannot explain that thing to somebody else, it's a sign that you probably don't understand it that well yourself. Right? So this is a good way of testing yourself. Try and teach the material. Right? cat fight. Okay, where should we go from here? Learning is understanding and then remembering, and if you focus on the understanding, that takes care of the remembering, mostly. Right? And I also stress the gradualness of it, the fact that you should study the way that you eat, right? Every day, a little bit every day. Cramming just simply doesn't work, right? Cramming would be like, again, not eating for 3 weeks and then suddenly eating 3 weeks, trying to eat 3 weeks worth of food in one day. Here's another analogy, and I like to teach in terms of analogies or metaphors or whatever. Imagine that I gave you an assignment, and that assignment was to grow a plant. And I gave you some seeds, and I said, here, I'm giving you these seeds. Your assignment is to come back in 3 weeks with a plant, right? And so the seeds are like the seeds of knowledge or whatever that I'm giving you in the lecture or in the book. But let's say I give you the seeds and you take the seeds and you're like, oh yeah, I'll get around to that sometime, and you set them aside someplace. And 3 weeks go by and then you realize, oh my God, that's right, I have that assignment tomorrow. I'm supposed to walk into class with a plant. Where are those seeds? Oh yeah, here they are. Here's some dirt. Put the seeds in the dirt. And here's 3 weeks worth of water. Dump it on the seeds. I ought to have a plant tomorrow morning. No, everybody knows it doesn't work that way, right? Learning is the same way. Here's another even better, simpler analogy. Exercise. Everybody knows, right, that you can't get in shape overnight. You can't, whatever you might have read on the internet or late night TV commercials, you can't lose 20 pounds of belly fat in a week or whatever. You can't get in shape quickly. It takes effort, it takes time, it takes persistence. You gotta have discipline, you gotta do it every day. What's true for the body is also true for the mind, it's true for learning, okay? So don't expect that you can pass this class or any other, really, by cramming. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, I got away with cramming in high school, and there might be some classes here that you can get away with cramming in. Probably because those are those easy A classes, and I'll probably have a whole other lecture on the phenomenon of the easy A and why it's bad, very bad thing. You might think, oh, easy A's are good, but I'm here to tell you they're bad, right? I might save that rant for another time, though. Anything that is worth doing, I think, is going to require some effort. Any kind of self-improvement, whether it's physical, trying to get in shape, whether it's mental, trying to learn something new, there's no escaping that it requires effort. Right? Now, is another thing, sort of like the late night TV commercials about getting in shape easily, no pain, and you can eat all you want and still lose 20 pounds. Everybody knows that's BS. But the same thing applies to studying, actually, to learning. Here's what you really should think of. Again, you are full-time learners. That's your full-time job, right? Learning should be your priority. And what does priority literally mean? It means you learn prior to doing anything else. You put that first. That's what priority means. So, for example, after you go to all your classes, if you were going to real classes, and maybe after you eat lunch, because you got to eat every day, right? Before doing anything else, do your homework, do your papers, do your assignments. For my class, do your reading, watch the lectures, do the listening, or whatever. And do it all purposefully, realizing that you're not doing it just to do it, just to go through the motions. You're not reading just to read. Say, well, he told me to read 5 pages. There, I read them. No, you are reading to understand. The point of reading is not just to read. It's to understand what's being said. So continuously ask yourself, am I really understanding what's in here? And if you're not, that's where I can come in and help you out, I think. Okay. So learning should be done gradually, should be done a little bit every day. Don't try to cram. The night before a test, should be just like any other night. You should not try and study extra. You should not stay up all night. In fact, you are going to hurt yourself. This is another reason why cramming is bad, because you need your sleep, right? Staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning is only going to hurt you because your brain just doesn't work as well when you're sleep deprived. So get a good night's sleep. Make sure your brain is firing on all cylinders and all of that. If it comes down to the night before and you haven't studied, it's probably too late to do anything anyway, right? There's lots of good expressions about what I'm talking about preparation. For example, you might have heard this expression, particularly if you were on an athletic team or if you're in the military, right? Some of you, I think, are probably in the reserves or ROTC or whatever. All battles are won or lost before they are fought, right? Just like all games, right, are won or lost before they are ever played. What do we mean by that? How can you win or lose a battle before you actually fight it? Because what determines whether you win or lose, at least 90% of it, I mean, there is such a thing as dumb luck, but 90% of it, at least, is preparation. The battle is won or lost before it is fought. The test is passed or failed before it is taken, right? It's not the act of taking a test that gives you anxiety, unless you've done badly on so many tests that you have this association now. It's what's causing the problem with the test is the preparation. I could give you all a test right now. I could give you a pop quiz that none of you would get nervous. You would all get 100%. I would just have to ask you things that you already know. Would you get nervous if I gave you a test consisting of questions like, what's your favorite color? What's your birthday? What's your mom's maiden name? What kind of car does your dad drive? I don't know. What's your cat's name? If I ask you questions like this, well, of course you wouldn't get nervous. What would be the point of getting nervous? Exactly. It's not the act of taking a test. It's the act of taking a test when you are unprepared, when you don't know the answers, right? So if you are prepared during a test, you'll be confident. You'll have no reason to have butterflies in your stomach or whatever. Here's another thing. Speaking of test taking, I get a lot of times students saying to me, well, the problem is I second guess myself, right, while I'm taking tests. Okay, this could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. If you are really guessing, then it's because you don't know and you're not prepared. But if you are, let's say, second guessing or re-examining your answers, that's a good thing. That's something you should do. In fact, when you are taking a test, what I would suggest is that, this is another big problem with the way we take tests. Someone has, let's say, a multiple choice test in front of them. What are they doing? They are fixated on finding the right answer, right? That's the whole point. You want to find the right answer. But the problem is, people are so obsessed with finding the right answer that they don't think about first reading the question carefully. You've got to focus on the question first. Read that question at least twice, slowly and carefully, and make sure you really understand the question. Because, for example, I've seen this many times. If you skim through a question too quickly, you could miss out on a single word like not. If the word not is there in the question, it's going to obviously change the answer, right? So read the question carefully, first of all. First focus on the question. And then, instead of looking for the right answer, look at all four answers. Because the problem is, if you think you found the right answer, then you don't consider the other answers. Like, that's it, moving on. No. Because, for one thing, the right answer is usually really the best answer. And there might be answers that seem like they could be true, but they're not the best answer, right? Especially if one of the answers is all of the above. Like A, B, and C could each be true, but the best answer is D, all of the above. So you've got to take your time, look at all of the answers, and in fact, what you might do is look for the wrong answers first. Why not? Look at each answer and say, well, this answer could not be true because, or this answer might be true because, this answer definitely false because. Look at all the answers and maybe just look for the wrong answers first and question why they are wrong, and sort of reassure yourself like, yes, I know this is right or this is wrong because. That's sort of a healthy, I wouldn't say second guessing, that's a healthy re-examination of your answers. And this is another thing you should do. Again, this is maybe more of a problem with in-person classes, but I've seen over and over again in my tests, people take the test as quickly as possible and get the hell out. They just want to get out of there, right? If you've got a 50-minute period, let's say, the smart thing to do is to use that entire period to go over the test multiple times and to check your answers. And not only that, here's the thing about multiple choice tests. In all multiple choice tests, it's almost unavoidable that there are going to be questions and answers that provide clues to other questions and answers, right? So you might get to question 42, and the answer of question number 42, you might think, well, wait a minute now, if the answer to question number 42 is A, then looking back to question number 7, this is not consistent with that. I've got to re-examine my answer for question number 7 because these two things happen to be related, and if the answer to number 42 is, let's say, true, then number 7 must be false or something like that. You see where I'm going with this? A good test taker will mine the test for information, for clues. And it's not even that the professor is necessarily trying to put the clues in there. It's unavoidable. It's part of the nature of a multiple choice test because it's got information in it, in the questions and in the answers. Even the wrong answers contain information which might be valuable. Like if this is a wrong answer here, that must mean that that is a wrong answer over there, right? If they're going to logically agree with each other. And the problem is if you don't go over the test more than once, you might not see those connections. If you just go over the test once and you just want to get it over with and get the hell out of there, then you might not see those connections, okay? So take your time on tests, go over them as many times as you can in the time allotted, and I'm going to give you 50 minutes on each of my tests, so you'll have plenty of time. You got 50 questions and 50 minutes. You've got a full minute for each question. That's pretty good, right? In fact, it's probably enough time for you to take a half a minute on each question and go over the test twice. Right? And that's what I would suggest you do. It's not like you got anything else going on during that time period anyway, right? What could be more important than the test you're taking at that moment, right? Be intelligent in the way that you approach tests. There is such a thing as a smart test taker, but remember the taking of the test is relatively insignificant compared to the preparation for a test. So focus on preparation, and preparation means understanding primarily. If you understand, and if you keep going over things and reaffirming your understanding of things, and if you don't understand, don't be shy, right? Then you won't need to focus so much on drilling, on memorizing. You will not remember things that you don't understand, right? I guarantee you. You might sort of remember something, a definition that you don't understand for a while, but it won't stick because it doesn't have meaning to you. It doesn't have significance because you don't understand it, right? Things that are meaningless, we tend to forget. They just kind of go right over our heads. Things that are significant, that have meaning, we tend to remember. Okay, I've probably gone on long enough on this topic. I could go on much longer. As you can see, I have strong opinions on learning. I'm not sure what I'll talk about next time, but I'll continue these little discussions on other stuff, on how to make the most of your college experience. And I'll put them up once in a while in between the music lectures, okay? See you next time.